Midnight, rain lashes the shuttered windows of a crumbling hacienda, the storm clawing at its bones. A candle burns low, its flame trembling as if afraid. The air tastes of salt and iron, thick with the scent of blood. From the corridors, a voice rises, not a hymn to heaven, but a guttural prayer to something far older. A tongue that scrapes like stone. Chains rattle in the dark. Screams echo across the bay, carried by thunder pounding like a war drum. September 23rd, 1867. The narrator whispers. San Juan woke to death in the air, and whispers of a woman who could not be silenced. San Juan, 1867. The harbor stinks of brine and sweat, of rum spilled into gutters, of cane ships moored heavy with chains. By day, the sun burns the backs of slaves bent over endless green fields. By night, the mansions of hacendados glow with firelight and music, walled against the stench of cholera and the rumble of unrest. The city breathes two lives, one of silk and silver, the other of sores and shackles. Inside a narrow tavern near the docks, smoke curls low and greasy. A single lantern flickers against cracked walls. Behind the counter stands Mateo Rivera, hunched, his hands trembling as he counts copper coins one by one. The rhythm is uneven. Tap, clink, pause, as if each coin carries its own ghost. The door creaks. Lucia Duarte slips in, skirts damp from the rain. She is young, eyes sharp, voice soft, a maid accustomed to silence. She presses her shawl close, scanning the room before approaching the counter. You keep open late. Mateo, she whispers. Coins don't sleep, he mutters. Pushing two together with a shaking thumb, she leans in. You've heard it too, haven't you? Mateo pauses, his lips pressed thin. I hear many things, most not worth the telling. This is... Lucia glances toward the empty tables, then lowers her voice. Don Ignacio Montoya collapsed at supper. His lips black as coal, they said. His servants swear it wasn't sickness, not cholera, something else. Mateo shuffles the coins faster, as though to drown her words. People die every day. The river takes them, the fever takes them. But not like this, she presses. 3 landowners gone in a month. Strong men, sudden as lightning. Their wives weep that it's curses, that some hand writes their names in blood. Mateo looks up, eyes clouded, fear etched in the wrinkles of his face. Hush, girl. Say no more. Lucia tilts her head, defiant. You think I'm the only one whispering? The governor's house hums with it. Servants won't cross the garden after dark. They say a woman walks there, with beads around her neck and smoke in her hands. Enough! Mateo's fist slams the counter, coins scattering like teeth. He lowers his voice quickly, eyes darting to the shadows. That word, brujeria, do not let it slip again. The walls have ears. The harbor has spies. Say it, and you may as well put a rope around your own neck. For a moment, silence presses them both, broken only by the clinking of chains drifting from the harbor ships outside. Heavy metal against restless waves. Lucia straightens her shawl, eyes burning with a secret thrill. Then let the chains listen, she whispers. They already know. Mateo stoops to gather his coins, hands shaking worse than before. The lantern sputters. Outside, thunder growls across the sea, and the first sparks of rumor take root in the storm. The cane fields stretch wide under the pitiless sun, each stalk whispering with the wind, each row a chain of green prisons. From birth, Isabel Duarte knew the sting of sweat and hunger, the lash and the silence that followed it. She carried with her one bright thing, a necklace of red beads strung together by her mother's careful hands. They clicked softly against her chest whenever she moved, a heartbeat she could not lose. And when the nights were darkest, her mother's lullaby carried her into fragile sleep, soft, low, almost a hum. Words half swallowed to escape the overseer's ear. Maria was smaller, wide-eyed, quick to smile even when the cane cut her fingers. She clutched a rag doll stitched from scraps, button eyes staring crookedly at the world. Isabel often teased her about the doll's crooked grin, but Maria would only say, "She smiles because she knows we'll be free." Freedom. Isabel had heard the word whispered, but never believed it could breathe. Their mother believed in other things, roots, leaves, powders ground in stone. She carried knowledge older than chains. At night, when the moon was high, she showed Isabel the secrets of the plants, which leaf cooled fever, which bark drew out poison, which flower's petals could still a racing heart. "You must learn," she whispered, her voice rough from work and punishment, "because one day they will need you, and I will not always be here." One evening, Diego Montoya wandered near the slaves' quarters. He was 10, pale-skinned, the son of the master, carrying a silver crucifix that glinted in the dusk. He found Isabel crouched over a wounded bird, her hands steady as she pressed leaves against the broken wing. "What are you doing?" he asked, curiosity plain. "Fixing it," Isabel answered without looking up. He frowned. "Birds don't matter. My father says God decides if they live or die." "Then maybe God sent me," Isabel replied softly, her eyes dark and steady. Diego said nothing, but he came again night after night, watching her grind roots and murmur the same lullaby her mother sang. The crucifix gleamed at his throat, and sometimes Isabel wondered if it was protection or a warning. Then came the day the whip cracked louder than thunder. Their mother had been caught teaching. A planter's child had fallen ill. Whispers said the healer's touch cured him. But in the world of the hacendado, such mercy was a crime. The slaves were gathered, forced to watch. Maria clutched her doll tight, eyes wide, as their mother's back was torn open, lashes cutting deeper with each cry. Isabel gripped her beads so hard they left marks in her palm. "Please," she shouted, her voice breaking. "She only healed." Tomas Calhoun, the overseer with whiskey on his breath, sneered. "Healing is the devil's trick, and the devil must bleed." By the time the whip fell silent, the woman who sang lullabies lay broken, her eyes closed, lips still moving as if whispering the final verse. Isabel bent low, catching the last word. "Remember." That night, Isabel hummed the lullaby herself, the notes trembling but unbroken. Maria curled against her side, clutching the rag doll. Diego watched from a distance, his crucifix shining in the firelight. He said nothing, but his eyes carried questions too heavy for a boy. Days turned into weeks. Isabel worked the fields, but in secret she practiced. She gathered herbs when no one watched. She whispered her mother's lessons into the dirt, into the wounds of those who bled. Fever broke under her touch. Coughs quieted when she brewed her bitter teas. Among the enslaved, hope flickered faintly, tied to the beads around her neck and the sound of her lullaby in the dark. But among the masters, fear grew. They saw her eyes linger too long, her hands work too surely. They muttered bruja under their breath, as if the word itself could chain her more tightly than iron. One evening, Diego approached her again, crucifix in hand. "You shouldn't do this," he said, "and let them die." Isabel answered, "They'll kill you. They already killed her." Isabel's voice was sharp as the cane's edge. He lowered his eyes, gripping the crucifix. "Then let me help you." Maria giggled, holding up her doll. "The bird boy wants to be a healer too." Diego flushed, but he stayed. He watched. He learned. And in the shadow of cruelty, a bond began to grow, fragile, dangerous, bound by beads and crucifix, doll and lullaby. The fields whispered with chains. The mansions glowed with firelight. And in the shadows, Isabel vowed she would never forget. The nights grew heavier after her mother's death. The cane fields sighed in the dark, and the sound of chains drifted from the harbor, iron clinking like a grim lullaby. Isabel worked in silence by day, but by night she moved in shadows, carrying her mother's knowledge like a secret flame. In the huts, she pressed cloths soaked in bitter teas against fevered brows. She stitched wounds with steady fingers. She ground roots into paste, whispering prayers to the ancestors as she worked. Word spread, the girl with red beads could heal. Slaves came quietly one by one, their voices hushed, their eyes pleading. Each time, Isabel offered what little power she had. Each time, she felt the weight of danger grow. One night, Rosa Velez arrived at her door. Rosa smelled of soap and river water, her hands rough from scrubbing clothes for the governor's household. Her voice was low, but every word carried weight. "You heal them, child," Rosa murmured, eyes sharp as coals. "And they'll follow you. Every scar you close is a promise. Every fever you break is a debt owed. I don't want debts, Isabel whispered. What doesn't matter? Power chooses its hand. And it's chosen you. Rosa became her confidant, humming songs under her breath that masked secrets in their rhythm. She brought news from town, gossip twisted into warnings. Which overseer was drinking, which soldier watched too closely, which name had been cursed at supper tables. Isabel listened, humming her mother's lullaby to keep the fear from devouring her. Diego kept coming too. At first, he pretended curiosity, asking about leaves and roots, scribbling clumsy notes in the margins of his catechism book. But his questions dug deeper. What does this bark do? It cools fever. And this root? It makes pain quiet. Could it kill? Her hands froze at the grinding stone. She looked up at him, eyes narrowing. Why do you ask me that? He held up his silver crucifix as though to shield himself. I only wonder what else you know. You wonder too much, Isabel said. But she showed him anyway. And he stayed. By day, Diego's father boasted that his son would marry a Spanish heiress, Catalina, daughter of a wealthy merchant. She'll bring gold to this family, Don Montoya declared, lifting his glass high. Diego forced a smile across the table, his fingers tracing the crucifix at his throat. At night, he slipped to the slave huts, where Isabel's beads gleamed in the firelight. There, his smile was different, unforced, unguarded, but their closeness was a wound waiting to open. Father Sebastian saw it. The priest moved like a shadow through San Juan, black robes heavy, eyes weary. He confessed sins that were not his own, listening more than speaking, recording doubts in a journal he hid beneath the altar floor. When he saw Diego and Isabel together, he drew a line in ink, whispering a prayer he wasn't sure God would hear. Diego, he warned one evening, catching him outside the chapel. Do not linger where the fire burns. You risk not just your soul, but hers. She heals, Diego answered, jaw tight. Is that sin? Perhaps not, but men will make it one. And they will not forgive. Still, Diego returned to her. And still, Isabel taught him. Together, they bent over crushed leaves and simmering pots. Sometimes, when silence stretched too long, she hummed the lullaby her mother once sang. And Diego closed his eyes, as if the sound itself could unchain him. Yet chains rattled still, louder each night. Rosa's whispers grew darker. The masters talk of unrest. They sharpen knives. They speak of gallows. Isabel gripped her beads, humming louder, as though the song alone might hold the world together. But Diego's betrothal loomed. Catalina's name hung like smoke in the air, bitter and choking. Betrayal was coming, dressed in lace and sealed with wax. And both Isabel and Diego knew it, though neither dared to speak it aloud. The lullaby ended one night with silence, the kind that carries a promise of storms. The morning smelled of ash and sour bread. Hunger had gnawed at Maria's belly for weeks. Her ragdoll clutched tighter with each passing night. Isabel warned her, never take from the kitchen, never risk the overseer's eye. But hunger is louder than fear, and bread, warm and sweet, is stronger than caution. They caught her in the courtyard, crumbs on her lips, the doll dangling from her hand. Tomas Calhoun stepped from the shadows, a flask of whiskey swinging at his hip. His scarred cheek glistened in the sun, his smile wide, cruel, practiced. He dragged Maria forward with one hand, holding her by the arm as though she weighed nothing. Caught red-handed, he announced to the gathering slaves, his voice thick with liquor and triumph. A thief among you, please, Maria whimpered. I was hungry, Tomas laughed, sharp as a blade. Hungry? You think hunger is excuse? You think cattle get pardoned because they cry? The slaves were forced to line up, overseers shouting, guns raised. The townsfolk gathered too, peering from balconies and shop doors, eyes wide with both horror and hunger for spectacle. Isabel pushed through the crowd, beads clinking against her chest. She's just a child, she cried. Punish me, not her. Tomas turned, his eyes narrowing. Ah, the little healer. He licked his lips, savoring the moment. You'll have your turn. But today, she pays. He shoved Maria to her knees, pressing her head down. The doll fell into the dust, button eyes staring up at the sun. "Mercy," Isabel begged, falling to the ground before him. "She knows nothing, please." Tomas crouched close, his breath hot with whiskey, his scar twitching as he grinned. His words dripped like venom. "Mercy is wasted on cattle." The crowd went silent. Even the chains seemed to hush. The lash cracked once, twice. Maria's cry pierced the air, small and broken. On the third strike, her body stilled, her hand limp beside the rag doll. The dust drank her blood. No one moved. No one dared. Mothers clutched their children. Men stared at the ground. Father Sebastian stood in the back, clutching his hidden journal, his lips whispering prayers that tasted of ash. Tomas straightened, wiping sweat from his brow, his voice calm, as if he had simply finished work. "Let this be lesson," he declared. "Steal again, and you'll meet the same end. Hunger is nothing compared to discipline." He spat on the ground and strode away, flask uncorked, the stench of liquor trailing him like a curse. Isabel crawled to her sister, lifting her small body, pressing her face into her blood-soaked dress. The beads around her neck rattled like angry teeth. Her lullaby rose, breaking, cracked, but determined. "I remember," she whispered into Maria's ear, though the girl could no longer hear. "I remember, and I will not forgive." She lifted her eyes to the watching crowd. Some turned away, too frightened to meet her gaze. Others, like Rosa, held it steady, lips trembling with a song unsung. Diego stood frozen near the edge, crucifix clutched in his hand. Shame etched into his face. Isabel's voice cut through the silence, low, steady, like the sharpening of a blade. "They will drink their own poison." The words hung heavy in the air, carried on the wind, etched into memory. Chains rattled again, but now they sounded different. Less like bondage, more like warning. The doll lay in the dust, one button eye torn loose, staring blindly at the sky. The nights after Maria's death were darker than any storm. Isabel's lullaby turned sharp, no longer meant to soothe, but to summon. Each note carried fury. Each bead of her necklace burned against her skin like an ember. She did not dream of blades or blood. She dreamed of powders hidden in goblets, herbs steeped in wine, curses whispered into the marrow of the powerful. Fire that no soldier could see, poison. Rosa Velez came first. She brought a sack of river-washed clothes, but hidden inside were scraps of paper, wax-sealed. Smuggled notes of which masters were traveling, which merchants were drinking too freely. "They speak of cholera," Rosa murmured. "But not every cough is a plague. Some of them choke on their own secrets. Some already fear you. I want them to fear more than sickness," Isabel said, her hands steady as she ground dried leaves into dust. "I want them to fear what they cannot name." Ignacio Torres entered then, a man whose back bore scars like maps. He had run once, captured, chained, broken, but his spirit bent toward rebellion like steel to fire. He carried the iron shackles he once wore, tucked beneath his shirt. He never parted with them, as if they reminded him who he was and who he refused to be again. "Letters from Ponce," Ignacio whispered, sliding scraps of parchment across the dirt floor. "More masters dead. Some swear they saw a shadow at their windows before their breath failed. Word is spreading faster than soldiers can ride." Isabel touched the letters, her beads rattling. "Then it begins." They prepared in silence, broken only by Rosa's humming and Ignacio's muttered prayers. Leaves, bark, powders mixed together in clay bowls. The air filled with the sharp bite of herbs, the bitterness of roots boiled down to syrup. But danger was constant. One night, the overseers raided the huts. Boots thundered on dirt floors, hands tore through baskets, spilling roots and cloth across the ground. Isabel stood still, heart hammering, the beads burning against her chest. A guard lifted a small pouch of crushed powder. "What's this?" he demanded. "Soap," Rosa said quickly, her voice trembling but steady enough. "Ground for washing." The guard sniffed it, sneered, and tossed it into the mud. They left with laughter, their torches spitting sparks into the night. Isabel's breath escaped her only when the last footstep faded. Later, old Mother Estrella came, guided by a child's hand. Blind, with eyes white as fog, she carried a raven's feather tucked into her sash. She spoke in riddles, her voice cracked but commanding. "You call for fire no one sees," she said, settling on the floor. "But fire consumes both wood and hand. Be sure the flame does not eat you first." "I don't fear fire," Isabel answered. "You should," Estrella said, lifting the feather as though it could cut the air. "Poison burns slow, and slow fires leave long shadows." Her warnings lingered, but Isabel pressed on. She buried powders inside loaves of bread meant for the governor's table. She rubbed tinctures into wine corks so that each pour carried death unseen. She hid vials beneath Rosa's laundry, beneath Ignacio's letters, beneath Estrella's riddles. Meanwhile, Diego wrestled with guilt and desire. He met Isabel by the river, where the moon turned the water to silver. His crucifix glinted, his voice broken. "You'll be discovered. Catalina suspects already." "Then let her," Isabel spat. "She'll choke like the rest." Catalina Montoya had arrived in San Juan draped in lace, carrying her ivory fan as though it were a weapon. She fluttered it when Diego spoke to others, her eyes sharp, her voice syruped with suspicion. She watched Isabel with venom disguised as curiosity. "I see you favor the healer girl," Catalina purred one evening, snapping the fan shut with a crack. "Be careful, Diego. Pretty eyes can hide serpents. My father says cholera carries in the breath of the lowborn. One kiss and you could die." Diego said nothing, but his grip on the crucifix whitened his knuckles. Back in the huts, Isabel chanted over her mother's beads, sprinkling powders onto embers so the smoke curled thick and bitter. She whispered names into the smoke. Montoya, Calhoun, every master who raised a whip, every hand that tore bread from the hungry. The fire hissed, invisible but alive, ready to consume. Rosa placed a hand on her shoulder. "Once you begin, there is no return." "I began the night they killed her," Isabel answered, her voice low, steady, unflinching. The chains clinked in the harbor, the ships rocking restless in the tide. Each rattle echoed like a countdown. Invisible fire was spreading, and no one in San Juan could see it, yet. The island of Puerto Rico became a stage of whispers and death. No banners of rebellion waved, no armies clashed. The war came quietly, pouring into goblets and steaming from bowls. Invisible fire spread across the haciendas. At a sugar estate in Ponce, a wealthy hacendado laughed too loudly, lifting his silver chalice. Mid-laughter he convulsed, wine spilling down his embroidered shirt. His chair toppled, his lace collar blooming red as blood burst from his mouth. Guests shrieked, prayers collided with screams, but the man's eyes rolled white before the priest could reach him. In San German, another master dropped in church mid-sermon. He clutched his crucifix, lips foaming, his body writhing on the sacred floor as parishioners scattered. The bell tolled above, not for worship but for death. On a plantation near Bayamon, a widow collapsed over her feast table, pearls scattering like bones, her powdered wig falling askew. Servants stared, frozen, as if the devil himself had walked among them. Each time, far away in the shadows of her hut, Isabel whispered their names over a bowl of burning herbs. The smoke curled around her beads. Her lullaby turned into a litany of death. Rosa counted quietly. 3, 4, 5, it is working. Isabel's eyes glowed in the firelight. Not enough. Not yet. But not all shadows obeyed her. Catalina Montoya had grown restless. She watched Diego's absences, the way his eyes sought Isabel even in crowded rooms. She snapped her ivory fan shut and murmured to her maid, "Follow him. Tell me where he goes." The maid returned pale, whispering of huts, smoke, and chants in the night. Catalina's smile was thin, cruel. "So, a witch. I knew." Meanwhile, Tomas Calhoun sharpened his knife beneath the barracks torchlight, whiskey glistening on his lips. "Men dying across the island," he muttered. "This ain't cholera. This is brujeria, and I'll gut the devil's bitch myself." His scar twitched when he smiled. Diego heard rumors too. Too many deaths, too neatly arranged. One night, he found Isabel kneeling by the fire, whispering names. He grabbed her wrist. "Enough!" His crucifix swung from his neck, catching the glow. "Tell me it's not you." Her eyes didn't flinch. "It is. Isabel, God's sake. These are men, yes, cruel men, but men. You're killing souls." You're damning yourself. They damned themselves when they whipped my mother, when they hanged Maria, when they starved children so their tables overflowed. Her voice rose like the storm. I do not damn myself. I balance the scales. He tightened his grip. And what of me? Do you balance me too? She pulled free, clutching her beads. Diego, I asked you once to stand with me. You chose silence. Now you beg me to stop, not because it is wrong, but because it frightens you. He staggered, stricken. I love you. That is why. Her laugh was hollow. Then love the ashes. From the shadows outside, Catalina listened. The words cut her sharper than knives. She pressed her fan to her lips, trembling with fury, before hurrying away to find Tomas. Days later, torches lit the cane fields. Soldiers stormed huts, overturning baskets, beating the air for secrets. Tomas led them, barking orders, his scarred face gleaming with sweat. She's close, he growled. The witch hides among her rats. Tonight we drag her out. Ignacio tried to stall him, stepping into his path. There's no witch, only fever. Tomas struck him down with the butt of his rifle. Blood ran down Ignacio's brow, his shackles clinking as he fell, but Isabel was waiting. That night, Tomas strode into a tavern where rumors claimed she worked her charms. His boots left puddles on the wood, his breath stank of whiskey. Mateo, the tavern keeper, shrank back, counting coins with shaking hands. Where is she? Tomas roared. A voice from the corner, calm, sharp as glass. Here, Isabel stepped forward, beads glowing red in the candlelight. Tomas sneered. You killed the brat. You poisoned my masters. You think you'll live to sing another curse? You killed Maria, Isabel said, voice steady. Not with your hand, but with your order. Mercy is wasted on cattle. I remember, his grin widened. Cattle don't deserve bread. She held up a vial, its contents glistening dark. Then drink as cattle do. He lunged, knocking the vial aside, glass shattering. He pinned her wrist, blade at her throat. You'll hang tomorrow, he hissed. I'll string you up where all can see, healer. She spat in his face, then choked first. For a moment, confusion flickered across his scarred features. His throat tightened. He coughed, laughed, then coughed again. What blood bubbled at his lips. He stumbled back, clutching his chest. Isabel's gaze never wavered. You drank before you came, she said softly. Whiskey. From Mateo's barrel. I touched it yesterday. Tomas fell to his knees, gasping, clawing his throat. His blade clattered. His eyes bulged, face turning red, then purple. The tavern fell silent, except for his choking. Isabel stood over him, beads glowing in the firelight, her lullaby whispering on her lips. He died in silence, his body sprawling across the tavern floor. Mateo crossed himself, trembling. Diego, who had followed too late, stood frozen at the doorway. Catalina pressed her fan to her mouth, eyes wide with horror. No one spoke. The overseer's scarred face was still, his blood pooling on the wood. Isabel watched, her expression unreadable. She said nothing. The silence screamed louder than thunder. The island did not breathe the same air after Tomas Calhoun's body hit the tavern floor. His death was not a secret, it was a spark. Word ran faster than horses. Carried in the mouths of sailors, shouted by servants, whispered in the governor's halls. The story shifted with every telling. Some said a demon burst from his chest, others swore a woman's voice sang as he choked. But all versions ended the same. A witch walks among us. In the Montoya estate, Catalina Montoya locked herself in her chamber, clutching her ivory fan like a weapon. Her fiancé's betrayal gnawed at her, but she wore her rage like a crown. To the city, she told another story. She seduced him, Catalina declared to her friends, her voice trembling in just the right places. A slave witch twisted his mind. Poor Diego could not resist. Her words spread, feeding the fire. In the drawing rooms of hacendados, panic simmered. Mothers clutched children tighter. Wives slept with crucifixes on their pillows. Doors were barred. Food was tasted by servants before touching noble lips. Every cough in the night felt like poison. Doña Esperanza, widow of the man who fell in church, wailed from her balcony. She has cursed us all. Our blood is hunted. Her grief bled into hysteria, and hysteria became truth. Governor Jose Maria Marchesi, seated under the painted ceilings of La Fortaleza, pounded his fist on the council table. "This ends tonight." The air smelled of sweat and fear. Advisors muttered of revolts, of uprisings in nearby colonies. A secretary read a list of dead, names of landowners, their wealth, their titles. The governor's lips curled in disgust. Superstition does not kill. Treachery does. The people must see her punished. Burn the root or the tree will grow wild. Orders went out. Soldiers swept through barrios and plantations. Torches lit the night. Huts were torn apart, baskets emptied onto muddy roads. Any woman with beads, any man with herbs in his pouch was dragged before soldiers. Tomas Calhoun's death became their justification, though his whiskey breath had killed him as surely as Isabel's powders. To the governor, he was a martyr. To the people, he was proof of justice. Yet among the slaves, whispers rose like smoke in the fields. Rosa Velez carried songs from hut to hut, her voice low, trembling but strong. She sings their names, she burns their chains, and fire walks the night. Children hummed the tune as they fetched water. Men bent over cane stalks, tapped rhythm on machetes. Lullabies carried vengeance hidden beneath their sweetness. Ignacio Torres, his brow scarred from Tomas's blow, leaned close to Isabel in her chains before the guards dragged him away. "They know," he whispered. "They celebrate in silence. You are not alone." But Diego Montoya was more alone than anyone. His father's estate reeked of scandal. Peasants spat as he rode past. His own family whispered that he had lain with a witch, cursed their house. Servants crossed themselves in his presence. Catalina, safe in her lies, spread rumors like wildfire. Diego gave her the poisons, she hissed to whoever would listen. He wanted his own father's throne. He tried to speak, tried to defend Isabel, tried to confess, but no one listened. His crucifix weighed heavier each day, as if even God turned away. The priest filled pages by candlelight, his quills scratching furiously. "Evil has walked into our parish, and we let it breathe our air. Whether she is devil's bride or angel of vengeance, I cannot say. I see only ruin." San Juan trembles and the devil laughs. He paused, ink blotting the page. He could not write what he truly feared, that her prayers had more power than his sermons, that her songs moved the people more than his psalms. He hid the journal under the altar, a secret testimony to a truth he dared not speak aloud. The hall of judgment smelled of sweat, smoke, and burning oil. Torches lined the walls, their flames snapping against the dark. A rough table stood at the center, chains bolted to its legs. Isabel sat bound, beads still around her neck, her eyes calm though her wrists bled. The judge's voice boomed. "Isabel Duarte, you stand accused of sorcery, murder, rebellion against crown and church. Confess, and you may yet save your soul." Her laugh was soft, almost gentle. "My soul is mine. You cannot take it." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "Confess," the judge thundered. "Name your accomplices." She lifted her chin. "Their names are written already, not by me, by their own cruelty. Gasps, curses, prayers." Soldiers shifted uneasily. Catalina stood among the spectators, her fan fluttering, face painted in grief. "She bewitched my Diego. She bewitched us all," she cried. All eyes turned to Diego, who stood silent in the back, hollow-eyed. He tried to step forward, but soldiers blocked his path. The trial was a spectacle, not a question. Witnesses came forth. A servant swore he saw smoke rise from her hut. A soldier claimed she whispered to the dead. A child babbled of lullabies in the night. Through it all, Isabel sat in silence, her gaze never wavering. At the end, the judge leaned forward, voice low. "Your silence condemns you." She met his eyes. "Then let silence speak." That night, in the cell where damp stone dripped and rats scurried, Rosa Velez and Ignacio Torres bribed a guard with the last of their coins. They crept in, carrying scraps of bread. Isabel sat cross-legged, beads shining faintly in the moonlight through the bars. "They will kill you tomorrow," Rosa whispered, tears in her throat. "I know," Ignacio leaned close. "Tell us something we can carry. A last word." Isabel's voice was steady, like a lullaby with no end. "Tell them I did not kneel. Tell them I did not beg. Tell them chains break when fire burns, Rosa wept silently. Ignacio etched the words into his memory like scripture. The guard returned, shoving them out. The door slammed. Inside, Isabel closed her eyes and hummed her mother's lullaby. The sound drifted through the corridor, soft as smoke. Unbroken by chains, dawn broke red over San Juan. The sea swollen with mist, the sky heavy as iron. The square was already crowded, soldiers pressing the restless crowd into order with the butts of their rifles. At the center, a wooden pyre crackled, its kindling soaked with oil. Isabel Duarte stood chained to the stake, her red beads still looped around her throat. Her dress was torn, her face shadowed with soot, but her eyes were unbroken. The judge read her sentence aloud, words smothered by the murmurs of the crowd. Catalina Montoya dabbed her eyes theatrically behind her ivory fan, though her lips curled with satisfaction. Diego Montoya stood on the edge of the square, trembling, unable to move forward. Crucifix clutched so tightly it cut into his palm. Father Sebastian raised his Bible, his voice quivering. "Confess, child, and God may grant you mercy." Isabel smiled faintly. "I already spoke my last words. The rest you will hear in fire." The torches lowered. Flames licked the wood, smoke coiled into the morning air. The crowd leaned forward, breath held, waiting for screams, but Isabel did not scream. She hummed instead, a lullaby low and steady, the same her mother once sang while hiding herbs in the dark. The sound rose above the roar of fire, fragile yet unyielding, until smoke swallowed it whole. When the flames died, the crowd scattered. Some swore they saw her red beads still glowing in the ashes, untouched by flame. Others whispered that the smoke carried her voice into the hills, where it still lingers. Her death did not kill the story. It birthed it. In the weeks that followed, whispers spread like wind. "She named them," peasants muttered, eyes wide. 45 landowners, all cursed before her death. Mothers warned their children, "Do not cross a woman with beads, for her fire still burns." On plantations, slaves sang her lullaby as they cut cane. The rhythm of machetes striking stalks like drums of rebellion. The overseers snarled, beatings fell harder, but the song returned each dawn, whispered by lips that would not close. In towns, her name became defiance. Lovers carved Isabel into tree bark. Widows muttered it over their dead. For the poor, she was no witch but a martyr, a healer whose justice reached where law could not. Generations passed. The Spanish flag fell. New rulers rose. Still, Isabel's name endured. Grandmothers rocked children to sleep with her lullaby. "Sleep, mi niño, chains will break, fire burns, and none escape." For some, it was a warning against sin. For others, it was a prayer for freedom. In the sugar fields of Puerto Rico, the red beads became a charm of protection. Women wove them into rosaries, whispered to carry Isabel's strength. Sailors swore the sea was calmer when a string of red beads dangled in the hold. Yet scholars argued. In dusty archives, historians debated if Isabel had truly poisoned anyone. Cholera raged in 1867, they noted, striking the rich as well as the poor. Could disease, not poison, have carried off the landowners? Could the tales of powders and curses be nothing more than superstition layered on tragedy?